What is up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. I was thinking about this the other day, Randy. There's a lot of people in the world, and all of those people are a potential source of wisdom and knowledge.
Are
Wouldn't
you
it
t-
be
are you
great?
saying are you saying there's 8 billion people smarter than me?
Oh, I didn't think of it like a diss like that. No, I was just saying like we could use, well, maybe potentially, right? I don't know. Who
Yeah,
knows? I don't know all 8 billion people, but we could use those people to better ourselves and to learn from others, right? Theoretically.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how can we learn from others? In this quick fix, hopefully you will give you tips to find out how to do so. And maybe you can start bettering yourself by using those resources that exist all around you in the human community. I'm Danny. I'm here with Randy. What's up, buddy?
What's up, Danny?
All right. So this is going to be a short episode. I'll start. My first one is read about other people's lives and perspectives. And I think the perspectives part is important too, because I think, we have like so many biographies, philosophies. I mean, just like personal narratives, all these different ways of writing and telling our stories, and they exist out there and you can access them. And I think actually using that resource, reading about other people's lives, reading about their stories, finding out their perspective, it's such a great way to learn from their mistakes, their successes, their failures, their experiences. I mean, literally, we forget how common the human experience is, I think. And when you start reading, you start seeing like all these connections and ways that you can just improve your life and learn from others, I think, without actually having to even interact with them. Literally, you do through the page.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love reading biographies. And one thing that I picked up on once I started reading biographies was a lot of the people who we think are like the most successful people, they literally endured through the most hellish childhood that you could possibly imagine. Like their life was terrible. And then during that terrible, they made a decision that they're going to improve their life. And that's what they did. And I think that's some for me personally, that was something huge that I learned from a lot of biographies that I read is like a lot of these people that we how they get so successful, they're so lucky. Gosh, why doesn't that happen to
Yeah.
me? And it's like you would not wish this childhood upon yourself or anyone you knew because it
No,
was terrible. So yeah, that's a great one.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that too, because also thinking like the Stoics, like you had slaves. Some of them were slaves. I mean, you had I just mentioned them before we started recording. Like Nietzsche had a horrible life. Like I think you realize that not all their lives were great. We emphasize that, and then we forget that like they really did endure a lot. So it takes a lot to be great yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first one is be humble. And this is one that I struggle with all the time because I have this
Yeah.
perception that I'm smart. And so then it's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
always right, you know? So this is one that I struggle with so much because I'm like, oh, I clearly know the answer. How could I don't have to listen to them? What they don't know what they're talking about. And so like I struggle with this all the
Okay.
time because I think that I'm intelligent, but actually, every time I catch myself doing that, I'm like, well, I mean, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but that's kind of a sign of low intelligence, not even giving the other person the time of day and thinking that you have all the answers. And actually, uh, being being humble enough to learn from somebody else, like because it's easy to teach someone else. At least that's the way that I see it. But learning from someone else, you almost have to be in that place of, oh, I don't know it all. And like
Yeah.
Socrates said, all I know is I don't know. But actually, it's easy to say that, but it's another completely different thing to actually act that,
Yeah.
to be that,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know. So I'm going to open up to whatever you have to say.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's why, a lot of people call Socrates like the great ironist, right? Because he was like really smart, but also very humble in a way, but kind of not also. It's kind of weird, he had that. But yeah, you're right. I think it is. It's really hard to kind of think of ourselves as not on that pedestal, as not, no, I have the same problem. I think I know way more than I probably do. And it makes me also just like close my ears and not pay attention to people or not even listen when they might have a better approach or just a faster way of doing something or just we don't have all the experience. I think that's such a good one. And being humble, I think, works really well with my second one, which is listen, actually listening to others, which again I struggle with all the time. I think it's one of the hardest things for some reason is actually like hearing what somebody else is saying and not assuming you know what they're saying, if you know what I mean. That I
Well,
struggle with all the time.
I listening is a good one, and a lot of people say like it's important to listen and listen. So like, what does that actually mean? Listening.
Oh, that's a good question. I think it means hearing, obviously hearing the words they're saying and hearing the reasons they're giving for it, and then trying to understand the perspective from which they're actually presenting the information.
Putting yourself in their shoes. Yeah,
Yes.
that's a good way to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It works.
Yeah.
Letting
Um,
it through, you know?
yeah, absolutely. Like if I think it was Lincoln or maybe one of his wives or something like that said that, if you were in their shoes, you'd be doing the same exact thing as them. So don't judge them for doing what
Yeah.
they're doing. And yeah,
That's a good way to look at it.
yeah. So trying when you're listening, trying to see it from their perspective. That's a great one. Uh, my next one is for how to learn from others is actually create a human laboratory. And I'm not talking about a laboratory with humans and test tubes. What I'm talking about is I learned this from the magic of thinking big. But basically, like we mentioned earlier, there's 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
So, and there are really great examples of what you want to do and really bad examples of what you want to do. So, in your own life, from people that you know, whatever you want to do, be, or have, find the best example of that and the worst example of that. So for me, how I used this initially was in terms of making money. And I looked at who's the person that I know that's the best at making money and who's the person that I know that's the worst at making money. And I use those as examples. And I said, I want to become more like the person who's the best at it and less like the person who's the worst at it. And so I just started picking out things that they did and ways that they handled money and ways that they handled themselves. And I was like, well, if they're doing this and this is working, then I should probably try and start doing this. And if they're doing this and it isn't working, well, I should probably avoid doing that. And it actually was really helpful for finding out ways that work, especially if you have like multiple models on both ends, because then you can say, what are the people who are really good, multiple people doing that's the same, and what are bad people doing who's the same? So then you can have really good modeling of it.
I really like that one because people always tell you to focus on like you look at the people that are doing really well at something and try and act like them or try to model their behavior or whatever. But they always forget that you also have all these examples of failure, and sometimes it's people who are really successful that fail at something. They might be really good at one thing and terrible in other parts of their lives, and we kind of don't see that when we also idolize, I think, certain traits. So I like that because I think you're getting a balance and you're also kind of reminding yourself also of what to avoid while you're trying to also, turn towards certain things and succeed. I think that's a really good way of thinking of it. Yeah. And you're like reading my mind because that works really well with my last one too, which is I think we need to model our character traits and habits on others. And what I mean by that is like find the character traits that you think will work for you by finding those models in the world, the examples, and then seeing what they do, what kind of habits do they have to cultivate these and to maintain these character traits over time, and then trying to adopt them. Because I think that's the hard part. We're good at sort of usually recognizing, like, oh, that person works hard or that person communicates well, but we're bad at seeing how they maintain it over time because we like to think that they're just naturally gifted. But the reality is everyone has to do work to keep up to a certain level and to surpass that level. And so we're failing to see that. And I think this helps remind us to look for that too.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good one because we are good at kind of copying what other people are doing.
Yeah.
I know it's not the right reference of it, but the mirror neurons we have in the brain, where like when other people are happy, we feel happy and everything like that. I think it also somewhat works when other people are doing things. We can copy that a lot better because we have this primal pathway within ourselves, and if we find the right people to model, then yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That
So
makes sense. I think it's a good reference for the mirror
yeah,
neurons. Why not?
yeah.
Yeah.
So my last one is kind of following the same line here, is actually choose your five. So we've all been told that we're the sum total of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And I like to extrapolate upon that a little bit, is that I don't think it's only the 5 human people that we spend the time with, but I think also the 5 thought leaders that we may encounter the most. So, if you're spending all your time on, we'll say, like Fox News or ABC or something like that, those
Yeah.
are going to be your five, because those are the five people. They may not be physical people you're with, but those are the five thought leaders you're spending the most time with. Whereas if you're, say, like reading biographies, reading books, listening to motivational material, stuff like that, you might have a different five people. So for me personally, or what I wanted to say about this is actually choose your five. Instead of it letting it be something that happened to you. Like a lot of people are like, well, you always got to watch the news, or
Yeah.
I grew up in this town. My family's in this town, so clearly my friends from middle school are the only people I'm going to ever be friends with. So like all of these things, instead of letting it happen to you, actually being more intentional about it and choosing it, because realizing the five people or thought leaders that you spend the most time around, that's who you're going to become. So like it or not, birds of a feather
Yeah.
flock together. So you get to
Yeah.
choose. It's up to you. And yeah, taking the responsibility to actually choose people who you would want to end up like.
Yeah, you made so many good points. I think like identifying the people that you actually want to end up like, uh, being responsible for yourself, making choices, not letting it be a passive activity or a passive thing that just happens to you, but actually recognizing that like everything in your life is up to you. If you're intentional and you make choices and you're proactive. So I think that's like, yeah, it's crucial. And you're right. I think whether you like it or not, whoever we hang out with and whatever we engage with a lot, I'm glad you mentioned too, like the news and stuff, like all of that affects us whether we know it or not, and you listen to people parrot, the arguments and ideas said by these people on TV and stuff. It's like they're obviously influencing your beliefs. Like you're obviously affected by that. So you should be making a choice about how you're thinking and your attitude and your mindset. And I think, yeah, this is a good one. You should be your own person, basically, and make those choices. Nice. So that's it in a nutshell. How to learn from others. Hopefully, all you can learn now, because you have these tips at your disposal. You can hopefully learn a little bit from us as we keep learning in this process. We'll be back later with a full length episode. Check us out on YouTube. Listen wherever you get your podcast. Like, subscribe, share. It helps us out a lot. And until then, though, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.